In 2003, one of the world's most recognizable toy companies was running out of time. Lego's sales were collapsing, losses were growing, and its future as an independent family business was no longer certain. But Lego had not been defeated by a better toy. No one had invented a better brick. The threat came from inside the company. For years, Lego had expanded into new products, new businesses, and new forms of entertainment, believing that growth would save it. Instead, the company was slowly pulling itself apart. How did a company that taught the world to connect things become a collection of pieces that no longer worked together? To understand how Lego began to fall apart, we first have to understand what held it together. In 1932, Ole Kirk Christiansen began making wooden toys in a small workshop in Denmark. The company later moved into plastic, but its real breakthrough was not a single toy. It was a system. In 1955, Lego introduced the system in play. Different sets were designed as parts of one expanding world. Then, in 1958, a new coupling principle made the brick strong enough to hold complex builds together, yet simple enough to take apart and use again. Lego's greatest advantage was not the brick itself. It was compatibility. Every new set expanded what came before, instead of making it obsolete. Children never had to start over. Their worlds could keep growing. That discipline made Lego powerful. Everything worked together. But decades later, the company would forget the same principle. Not in its bricks, but in its decisions. For decades, that system worked. But by the late 1990s, the world around Lego was changing faster than ever. Video games and electronic entertainment were taking more of children's attention. Competition was growing, cheaper alternatives were appearing, and traditional toys had to fight for every free hour. The brick itself had barely changed. Everything around it had. Inside Lego, a fear began to grow. Perhaps the system that had made the company successful could no longer guarantee its future. Building alone no longer seemed like enough. Children's attention was increasingly drawn toward characters, stories, movement, screens, and entire entertainment worlds. Lego no longer wanted to remain simply a construction toy company. It wanted to become an entertainment brand, present everywhere children spent their time. The fear was understandable. Lego really did need to change. But gradually, the company reached a dangerous conclusion. To survive, it had to become something more than Lego. Lego began searching for its future far beyond the traditional brick. The company invested in theme parks, branded stores, clothing, video games, television projects, and entirely new play systems. It introduced more characters, colors, shapes, and specialized elements, trying to offer something for every kind of child. Lego appeared to be transforming from a toy manufacturer into a global entertainment company. And some of these experiments genuinely worked. Mindstorms combined building with programming. Lego Star Wars turned a familiar story into a new space for creativity. And Bionicle gave Lego its own world, characters, and mythology, becoming one of the company's greatest successes. But beside them came Galidor, Clickits, and other products that had less and less connection to the system Lego had been built upon. The problem was not simply a few unsuccessful sets. Almost every new idea brought new pieces, new shapes, new materials, and new manufacturing demands. The product range expanded. Production and distribution became harder to manage. Development took too long, and the company did not always understand which sets were actually making money. Lego had more ideas than ever before, but those ideas no longer strengthened one another the way its bricks did. The company called it innovation. In reality, it was losing control. By 2003, the consequences were impossible to hide. Lego's net sales fell by 26%, from 11.4 to 8.4 billion Danish kroner. Instead of profitable growth, the company recorded a pre-tax loss of roughly 1.4 billion kroner. In its own annual report, Lego named the cause directly, an unsuccessful growth strategy. For years, the company had invested heavily in expanding its product range, but the new products failed to deliver the expected results. Some even took sales away from Lego's classic sets, increasing costs while weakening the core business. Lego was growing in the number of directions it pursued while losing money, market share, and the ability to control its own complexity. Lego did not have too few ideas. It had too few rules for making those ideas work together. By the beginning of 2004, another year of the same strategy was no longer an option. Kjeld Kirk Christiansen returned to the company's day-to-day leadership and launched an emergency action plan. Then, in October, 35-year-old Jørgen Vig Knudstorp became CEO. But the crisis did not immediately disappear. After write-downs and restructuring, Lego ended 2004 with a net loss of 1.93 billion Danish kroner. The company was now fighting for survival, and Lego's rescue would not come from one brilliant executive or one miraculous product. It required a different way of making decisions. The new team did not begin by searching for the next big idea. Instead, it asked a few simple questions. What was Lego uniquely good at? Which products were actually making money? Which capabilities did Lego need to control itself? And which could partners handle better? The answers led back to the brick and the construction system built around it. To save Lego, the company first had to take itself apart and decide which pieces were worth putting back together. The first step was a return to the core. Lego refocused on what made it different from every other company. Construction, City, Technic, Duplo, and other lines built around the shared Lego system once again became the center of the business. But returning to the brick was not enough. The business behind it had to become simpler. Years of uncontrolled expansion had left Lego with an enormous number of colors, shapes, and specialized elements. Every new piece could require its own mold, materials, factory capacity, storage space, and additional layers of distribution. Designers were shown the real cost of introducing new elements and encouraged to create more with the pieces Lego already produced. The restrictions did not eliminate creativity. They gave it direction. The changes extended far beyond the design rooms. Production was moved out of Switzerland, European distribution was centralized in the Czech Republic, and the number of components used across Lego models was reduced. Lego also stopped trying to build every new business on its own. It began relying more heavily on outside partners to develop video games and film projects. In 2005, the company sold control of the Legoland parks, freeing cash and management attention for its core toy business. At the same time, Lego began listening again to the people closest to its products: retailers, children, and adult fans. Development times were shortened. Product profitability was measured more carefully. Decisions that once relied on ambition alone were now tested against costs, demand, and Lego's actual capabilities. This did not mean abandoning innovation. It meant becoming more selective about where innovation belonged. Lego Star Wars showed what that could look like. At its center was still a construction toy. Familiar characters and scenes became things children could build, take apart, and recreate for themselves. When Lego wanted to bring that world into a video game, it did not try to build another game studio of its own. Development was handled by an outside partner with the necessary expertise. The game expanded Lego's world without forcing the company to control every part of it. In 2005, Bionicle remained LEGO's best-selling theme. Star Wars ranked second, while the externally developed LEGO Star Wars video game sold more than 3 million copies. LEGO still experimented, but now in ways that expanded its system instead of pulling the company away from itself. The results appeared faster than many expected. In 2005, revenue from LEGO's core business increased by 12%. After a net loss of nearly 2 billion Danish kroner the year before, the company ended the year with a profit of 505 million. In 2006, revenue grew by another 11%, while pre-tax profit from continuing operations rose to more than 1.5 billion kroner. This was no longer the result of one successful set or a lucky holiday season. The economics of the company itself were changing. Fewer unnecessary elements reduced costs. Shorter development cycles helped LEGO respond to demand. Partnerships allowed the company to enter new forms of entertainment without building every new business from scratch. LEGO was not rescued by one brilliant idea. It was rescued by learning which ideas to pursue and which ones to leave behind. At first, LEGO's turnaround looks like a story about returning to the brick. But what the company truly returned to was something deeper: the system. LEGO was not saved by rejecting change. If it had simply continued selling the same sets while ignoring new technology, it still risked being left behind. The mistake was not searching for a new future. It was searching in too many directions at once, without asking whether all those ideas could work together. New stories could still be created. New technology could still change the way people played. But every new element had to connect with what already made LEGO special. The company that taught the world how to connect pieces survived only when it learned to connect its own decisions again.